13 years of waiting, and we're going back to Pandora. Avatar: The Way of Water feels pretty familiar. It's a return to the 2009 story, where the protagonist is convinced once again that Pandora is his home that needs to be defended. Except this time, the perspective is different. Now Jake Sully has a family, with whom he's fleeing the war. And we see the world of Pandora not through his eyes, but through the eyes of his children. This change in perspective is a key decision by James Cameron. This movie didn't try to get any bigger and louder, as is usually the case with sequels. On the contrary, The Way of Water is about exploring nuances. It got deeper, literally and metaphorically. The core mechanics remain the same, but what we see has completely changed. Instead of flying over trees, there are dives into the depths of the ocean and coral reefs. You can see that they are filmed in a similar way. The rhythm and angles of such scenes are repetitive, and the editing is slow and precise. Everything we love about the first Avatar remains. It's just that the context is different now, and it's not just a change of scenery.
You know, it had its own momentum, and that took us up through the release in 2009. But sitting down in 2012, because I went off and did some deep ocean stuff, you know, and built a sub and went down 7 miles and all that cool stuff in my other life, right? But when I put my big movie hat back on, I said, you know, what story do I want to tell? Of course, I'm going to go back to Pandora. I'm going to go back to Jake and Neytiri. And it's like, what if Romeo and Juliet didn't die?
But why did Cameron choose a change of perspective rather than zooming in, as, for example, was the case with Terminator 2? It would have been more interesting in the Avatar sequel to develop Jake's story arc as a wise ruler, instead of extolling family values and unity with the uncharted part of Pandora, wouldn't it? Moreover, in the Avatar sequel, Cameron is deliberately repeating his own movies and looking inside himself, more than thinking about what the audience would like to see. I just don't think he's that interested in making movies in the traditional way anymore. And there are good reasons for that. Let's start with the title. The Way of Water is a concentrate of everything we know about James Cameron. For example, there is a scene where a huge ship with the main characters on board is wrecked. Water gradually floods the compartments. The hull makes a terrible scraping sound of metal, and the lights flicker. Sounds familiar? Of course, it's the Titanic. What about a mother's love that manifests itself through revenge? Or the topic of an adoptive family? That's right, it was in Aliens. Remember how the xenomorph mother avenges Ripley for the death of her offspring? Neytiri avenges her child in The Way of Water in the same way. This isn't the first time Cameron has explored the topic of blood paternity either. For example, in True Lies, the story arc of Schwarzenegger's character is to become a close and understanding parent again. And Jake's journey in the Avatar sequel is exactly the same. And what about the aliens who have a close relationship with the ocean? Well, the movie's environment is all about water. No, I'm not talking about Avatar 2. I'm talking about the abyss. Not enough? Well, there's more. There are more similarities with the Terminator sequel than anything else. For example, the battle between the protagonist and the antagonist takes place against a background of chains, fire, and metal. Moreover, both characters are not humans. Both personify their species. Both were originally created to kill. And most importantly, in both movies, the protagonist protects his loved ones while the antagonist wants to kill them. But in The Way of Water, Cameron adds a new dimension. The struggle unfolds, not only between the characters, but also between their inner conflicts. What it means to be part of nature, and what it means to be its destroyer. Actually, it's interesting that Cameron now considers humans to be an obvious evil. Contrary to the Terminator, the human race here is not the embodiment of dignity and longing for life. Instead, the human race tends to take it away. This idea runs through all his works. Humans against nature, technology against harmony. In The Way of Water, this conflict reaches its peak. Also, I have the feeling that Cameron has been trying for years to get closer to one important theme: water. Even excluding his documentary projects, 4 out of 9 films focus entirely on water and its power. If you add the documentaries about Bismarck, Titanic, and the mid-ocean ridge, 7 out of 12 of his works focus entirely on water. And it started from the very beginning. Cameron's first full-length movie was the sequel to Piranhas. He may have gotten into the project by accident after the previous director left, but the symbolism is obvious. For a man who has spent his entire career exploring water, such a start seems almost poetic.
The most important lesson about water is you're stupid if you do it. It's gonna hurt a lot.
Your entire career has been water.
I know. What it does is it speaks to my insecurity as a director, that I have to do the thing that other people just go, nah, that's too hard, I'm not doing it. I figure I've got an edge there.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, no, but obviously I love water. I love the challenge of working in water. I love diving, I love exploring, I love it for real. In fact, after Titanic, I spent 8 years just doing deep ocean expeditions, and I was happy as Larry. I love it. I love diving, I love being in submersibles and all that. So why not merge that love back into my love of narrative fiction and big extravaganza Hollywood type filmmaking.
Cameron's words are not just a declaration of love for water. It is also a reminder of its fragility. This idea permeates the way of the water. Cameron has been an avid scuba diver for years, and the ocean beckoned him with its mystery since childhood. He has spent thousands of hours in shallow water and hundreds of hours in deep water. In 2012, he made his first solo dive to the bottom of the Mariana Trench as part of the Deep Sea Challenger expedition. Cameron definitely tells us what he knows and loves. In The Way of the Water, Cameron shares his fascination with the underwater world while raising questions about its vulnerability. The film shows the ocean as it might have been 300 to 500 years ago, before industrialization began irreversibly altering ocean ecosystems. That is, in Cameron's eyes, the ocean is the point of contact with our planet. And maybe the theme of water in his movies is a way to reach out to audiences, to inspire them to protect this fragile beauty.
That is Sahelu, the bond.
In an interview with the National Geographic, Cameron explained why he is now interested in a series of movies in the same universe. For him, Avatar is a way to communicate with people on a global level. Obviously, Cameron's main goal is to draw attention to the protection of nature. In the first movie, he spoke about it through the image of the rainforest, and in the sequel, through the ocean. Cameron creates a variety of biomes that both fascinate the audience and make them think about the problems of the real world. The coral reefs that received so much attention in The Way of the Water may remain only in documentaries in just 70 years. And Cameron's dream of preserving the beauty he saw during his deep-sea dives is reflected in every frame of the new movie. And to draw even more attention to these issues, Cameron pre-planned a whole series of sequels to Avatar. He simultaneously worked on 4 scripts for the next movies, realizing that the detailed development of the world of Pandora would allow to explore the topics of ecology and interaction with nature more deeply. The third part of Avatar is already in production, and we won't have to wait another 13 years. The film, titled Avatar: The Seed Bearer, is scheduled for release on December 19, 2025. Although the release was originally set for 2024, the studio has postponed the premiere to perfect the details. So the count is years, not decades. Do you think Cameron will manage to surprise us once again? And will there be any more premiere postponements? Let's discuss in the comments. However, that's only one aspect of it. Like I said at the beginning of the video, compared to the first movie, the Avatar sequel changes the perspective. And maybe that's where its greatest strength is. Cameron is so passionate about the avatars because he can do anything he wants in those movies. He can shoot any scene he can think of, take any angle of the camera, and hold a shot for as long as the story demands. Any topics and ideas that come to his mind can be implemented in the world of Pandora. There's a reason why The Way of Water repeats so many of the filmmakers' previous and very different works. Even the first Avatar did the same thing sometimes. Look at this shot of a face in flames, or listen to how composer James Horner reuses music from Aliens. So, I wouldn't be surprised if Awa turns out to be a planetary artificial intelligence, like Skynet in the Avatar sequels.
Awa has heard you!
For the director, the Avatar universe is a playground with limitless possibilities, both in terms of setting and filmmaking, which actually makes him an animation director. You may not have noticed, but since the production of the first Avatar, James Cameron has been incredibly passionate about tools that are more about animation than traditional filmmaking. Thus, Avatars, and for example, Alita, which I consider to be his movie, are based on performance capture technology, which allows us to accurately capture the details of an actor's facial expressions. However, the long post-production process is still tied to the Herculean manual work of the animators. The characters' emotions look convincing on the screen because the animators who worked on this or that shot tried to accurately recreate the nuances of acting. In The Way of Water, this process became even more complicated. For the first time in history, the team used an underwater performance capture, achieving a readout of data on the actors' movements and facial expressions underwater. Special tanks, adapted markers, and cameras were created for this purpose. It was a breakthrough, given that water was considered a serious barrier to such technology until recently. The actors also underwent serious training. For example, Kate Winslet learned to hold her breath underwater for more than 7 minutes, and the entire cast trained in free diving. As a result, they managed to create believable underwater scenes and reduce the number of editing cuts. Senior animation supervisor Daniel Barrett mentioned that this approach to animation is like going from emotionally believable to anatomically believable, and that's despite filming underwater, where until recently, performance capture was considered impossible because the water created a lot of visual obstacles during the motion capture. I don't want to minimize this movie to just its technical aspects, because, well, that would be wrong. But I still don't believe that most of the images on screen are CG. I really don't understand how Cameron and his team did it. How did they make us believe in the existence of Pandora, its inhabitants, and underwater worlds?
Our goal is to put something up on the screen that defies the audience's ability to determine whether it was shot photographically with a camera or whether it was done some other way. We use, CG as if it's a camera, but we just want a kind of a hyper-real, dreamlike experience, something that just feels real, can't be real, can't possibly be real, but it looks real. So you get into this weird cognitive dissonance as you're watching it, right?
Okay, I can assume that it's technically possible. Here, every moment of the movie is the result of the aggressive polishing of details to perfection. From lighting and textures to rendering. For example, this small shot of a surface colliding with a liquid with incredible precision costs $100,000. The process of creating such scenes took much longer than is usually required, even for major Hollywood blockbusters. And it's not surprising since they are not 100% computer graphics. For example, the saddle, belt, and most of the water in the footage are real, and the characters' hands were processed using rotoscoping, a technology that allows animators to draw on top of a real image. Weeday FX Studio developed new systems for water simulation, lighting underwater scenes, and working with underwater objects. They achieved photorealistic character interaction with liquid and underwater flora and used a combination of real and digital water. In some scenes, they used frame rate increases of up to 48 frames per second to make the movement in the water look smoother and more realistic, creating a presence effect. As senior visual effects supervisor, Eric Saindon explained, the visual effects artist used real water to interact with the character's saddle, hands, and fingers. However, digital water was created in the background. As viewers, we've gotten used to the fact that we're no longer impressed by anything done on a computer, especially when it comes to visual effects or large fictional worlds in movies. But here, the seams are simply imperceptible. The real actors are on the same screen as the Blue Giants, and during filming, the height had to be taken into account in the composition to make it all look natural. The decorations and nature footage are ingeniously blended with the magnificent scenery of Pandora, and the camera can move in the same scene from realistic human positions to completely impossible angles, which are more typical for animation than for movies. I think this is another reason why Avatar successfully immerses us in the world of Pandora. Of course, we have an hour and a half of the movie where the plot just stops, and we watch a slice of life on the islands. But the approach to Avatar as animation allows Cameron to reveal more narrative nuance than we're used to seeing in blockbusters, and that creates a deeper emotional experience for the audience and a closer relationship with the movie. As for the recurring themes and motives, well, for Cameron, this is the third sequel in his career, and you can see that the same family theme has been with him all the time. Let's get 10,000 likes on this video, and we'll do an in-depth analysis of either Part 1 or Part 3, right after its premiere, so we don't have to wait for ages.
Then I look at Aliens, I think I did the same thing, and I look at Terminator 2, I think I did the same thing. So technique-wise, yes, we're much more advanced. You give the audience comfort that the things that they liked about the first film are going to be there, but they're going to be turned upside down or jumbled in a way that you don't expect, and there will be swerves that you don't expect.
At the same time, there is a chance to focus on Pandora, creating different biomes of the world already known to the audience. Therefore, we can see something familiar in the movie, but at the same time, something new.
Well, if you look at the way George Lucas did it in the universe that he created, which is astonishing still to this day, he chose to make each different biome, each different culture have their own planet. And I thought, well, that's not the way Earth works. I mean, Earth has, it's the Arctic, the Antarctic, the jungle, rainforest, desert, mountains, all these different biomes and all these different cultures with incredible variation. And, in doing my research on indigenous culture, you just see such an explosion of ideas and, wardrobe and belief systems and so on. I thought, man, I can spend as many films as I want to make just on Pandora, just by going to different places.
I find it especially valuable that as Cameron gets older, he tries to look inside himself and make films that he himself would like to watch on the big screen. It's a really interesting task for a filmmaker to stay focused on one story over the years and to please his inner child, who wishes that the adult version of himself would succeed.
I think it's the biggest challenge of directing is to always see the movie every day with new eyes. As we learn about human consciousness, we're realizing that there's this kind of mirror neuron thing, where when you know somebody pretty well, you can kind of run a simulation of them in your head of how they're going to react if you say something X, Y, or Z. Are they going to be happy? Are they going to be pissed off? You know in advance what your intention is. That's how you form the sentence, right? So I think as directors, we have a bigger version of that simulation. That's the audience. And that audience, in my case, is populated by 300 or 400 of me when I was 14.
That's what I like Cameron for. Whether it's the ocean, nature, or family themes, or maybe the design of creatures, mechanisms, or the Chthonian planetary intelligence, it's always noticeable when a person loves something with all their heart. But now, James Cameron doesn't make movies within the traditional concept. After all, the animation perspective suits him much better. Cameron finds the perfect balance between his technical innovation and his desire to bring important environmental messages to the audience. He turns Avatar into a franchise where you can endlessly expand the world and change narrative angles. So, I think that right now, this is definitely not the final form of his creative evolution.